Hello everyone and welcome back to the CDL podcast channel. This isn't going to be a normal podcast. This is going to be actually a special, kind of highly requested video. Something that once I saw the news go down, I knew right away I was going to do it. This is going to be the video dropping somebody from each team. So obviously the league announced a few days ago that it was going to 4v4 for the next game like it always used to be. So we're going to go through each team in the league from bottom to top and decide who I would drop from the team. And I'm obviously, a lot of these teams, they're going to drop a lot more than one player. They're probably going to drop the whole roster and pick up completely new players, or maybe keep one and make some trades. But I'm not going to go through all those scenarios because obviously that would take forever and would be pretty impossible to predict. So I'm just going to say, let's say the teams were forced to keep 4 of their starting players or maybe their bench players, and then they were just forced to drop 1 player and go forward with those 4 players in the next game. So I'm going to drop 1 player off each roster and kind of make a 4v4 roster. Be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy this video, and especially if you're new, and comment down below who you would drop off each team. Now, mine might be a little controversial because sometimes I might drop the best player in the team if it's a role issue to get younger talent in, or maybe I'll drop a player that was actually not the worst player on the team, because if I just drop the worst player statistically on each team, it'd be pretty boring. I mean, that's pretty easy, anybody can do that, but I might get a little creative with some of my rosters. And like I said, remember, a lot of these teams have players that probably 3 or 4 of them should be dropped, or maybe all 5, but just for the sake of the video, we're just going to drop 1 player and act like they have to keep 4 of them for the next game. I know obviously a couple people have already been dropped, like Clay was dropped from Dallas, or mutually agreed to part ways, whatever you want to say. It sounds like Wuskin and Scraps may have been dropped. Jared's a free agent. I'm assuming Prestinni and Arcitys are probably dropped from Chicago. Arcitys was probably offered to stay, but I'm thinking he wanted to leave with Prestinni. So things like that, but I'm going to go act like that's not happening and just say who I would drop anyways, because most of the teams haven't announced anything. Although Parasite did say, apparently like every team has their roster set for the next game or something already. But yeah, we'll start bottom and then go all the way to the top teams based on the standings. So the first team is LA Gorillas. Their roster was Blast, Aqua, Saints, Vivid, and Decimate to end the year. And on this roster, we have a true main AR in Aqua, and he's also really historically the best player all time on this team. Maybe you could argue Saints is. It's one of those two, definitely. And then Blast can really fill in a flex role, I think, pretty well, even though he was the main AR for them most of the year once he came in the lineup. And the other 3 are true subs, so I think that one honestly has to go. And I think I would go with a young talent on this team. I think I'm going to keep Vivid and Decimate. Vivid seems like he's like a super good top search player, and if he can get his respawn to come around a little more, he could be a super good building block for this team. And then Decimate is the same way, really good in search and has respawn potential. So those 2 can really like keep this team along with Blast as a top search team. And then if they can have Aqua slay and maybe pick up somebody in Saint's place, or maybe drop one of Decimate and Vivid since it's 4v4 for more slaying power, they could be pretty good. I think Aqua, Blast, Vivid, and Decimate has decent slaying potential, and that'd be a disgusting search team. So yeah, I'm going to get rid of Saints, even though he's maybe the best player all time on this team with his accolades, because he's really the only one along with Aqua with any accolades. So yeah, I'd say I'd keep Aqua on the main, Blast on flex, and then Vivid and Decimate on the subs. And I think this team, for a bottom team, actually has decent potential because they have a lot of young players that are really good at search. So they're going to be always able to take that map 2 off you and make it a 1-1 series if they lose the first one. And if they're able to steal the first hardpoint, kind of like that Elevate team in BO3, they'd be super good. If they steal that first hardpoint, they're probably going to beat you in the search, and then it's just up to them not to get reverse swept. Then the next team is Seattle. Obviously, to end the year, they had Octane, Pander, Slacked, Proto, and Apathy. And if we only have to drop 1 player, I would drop Proto, although I would like to drop Pander and Proto and maybe do something with that. But if we have to choose one, we're dropping Proto. Octane can stay on the main AR, obviously. Then Pander is a natural flex, so he can go there, and then Slacked and Apathy are natural subs, so they can play there. I think this team should just drop Pander also, though, and bring back Enable, since he would still be technically on the bench. Because Enable, to me, is like the perfect flex. He's very good at a flex role. He used to be a main AR, and then all of a sudden he became like a main SOG for 100 Thieves, so I think he's like the perfect guy to play the flex role over Pander. So their roster would then be Octane on the main, Enable on flex, and Slacked and Apathy on the subs. Now, this roster didn't have much success in this game, but this is a very different game. Karma wasn't in it. Enable wasn't in it. Slacked hated the game, so I think, honestly, the roster just didn't get a fair shake in MW, being that it wasn't even traditional COD. But this roster for 4v4 would be insane at respawn. All you'd have to do is steal a search every once in a while, and they'd be a pretty damn good team, I actually think. Although they could maybe drop a Navel, or I don't know, I wouldn't drop Abezy. They probably could drop a Navel for somebody who's a flex that's way better at search, like Priesta or something. But I mean, I think that roster would actually be pretty good, a lot better than what they were. I mean, basically dead last. The next team that finished was Paris, and their roster, well, they had Denz, Lucas, Shox, Zed, and Kismet, and I mean, there are so many great players out there, especially with the league cutting down to 48, that I think they should probably just drop all 5 and pick up a better team, maybe like that Team War team that dominated the EU scene for the amateurs. And I think people didn't want to play for Paris last year because they didn't want to have to move, even though they didn't have to. And it was just like, yeah, Paris isn't an NA team. They probably won't have a lot of fans that don't want to play for them. But now with the limited spots, I think if a player gets offered anywhere and they're a fringe player, they're going to take it. So they might be able to get a better roster. So I'd drop the whole team probably. But if we have to keep 4 of them, like I said, I'm going to do something kind of weird, I think, and I'm going to drop Denz. Now, statistically, he might have been their best player this year KD-wise, but that's because he plays so slow. It's pretty impossible for him to have a bad KD. Because he's the main AR that plays so slow, it's pretty hard for him to go like double neg on any map. He's going to go around even like all the time at least. And I think Shox could take on a flex role. I believe he's done that before. And then Luca has always wanted to be the main AR, so you could throw Luca on the main AR, and then Kismet and Zed are super aggressive subs. Because honestly, Luca and Denz are 2 of the slowest players I've ever seen, if not like the 2 slowest. So I think splitting them up would help this team keep up with others. It seemed like a lot of times this year, they were just slower in respawn, and they just struggled so much in it until really the end of the year. They got okay at Dom, and they were obviously really good at search. But in respawn, they seem to struggle so much keeping up in the slaying department, and a lot of that could be due to them just not having nearly as much talent as most teams. But I do think it was partially because we had guys like Shox, Shox, Kismet, and Zed up in the front lines playing super fast, but then their ARs in Luca and Denz were just too slow to keep up with them. So they just had pacing issues, so I think getting rid of one of those 2, and then Luca's a little bit younger talent, so I'd keep him. I think getting rid of those 2, one of those 2 would help their pacing issues. Then the next team on the list is OGLA with Slasher, Hollow, Kenny, and Draza. This is an interesting team because obviously it's going to come down to Draza or Hollow, because Slasher and Kenny and TJ are pretty much like undroppable players in most circumstances. And especially going into a 4v4 game, I mean, Slasher's won a world championship and been to another final in 4v4. Kenny has been to a final in 4v4 and was arguably the best player in the last 4v4 game we had. And then TJ won multiple championships with Slasher in the last 4v4 game we had, and he won a championship last year. He's obviously a really good player and a search star. And role-wise, it would seem to make more sense to keep Hollow than Draza, because they'd be looking for a flex. Kenny and TJ are subs, and then Slasher's an AR, so they'd be looking for a flex, and Draza is more of a sub. So I think I would say I'd keep Hollow, although Draza might be a better prospect, but Hollow just fits better role-wise. And that was the main issue with this team before, was roles. So I think this team would be solid, but let's be honest, I think they're going to drop Draza or Hollow, actually both of them, and just pick up Gunless and become the most nasty team ever, with Slasher on an AR, Gunless on a flex, and then Kenny and Tej on the subs. I honestly think that's probably what's going to happen with this team, and they're going to be absolutely nasty if that is what happens, because, man, Gunless, people like to forget, but he is like the best flex in the game pretty much. And then next is Minnesota, an interesting roster. At the end of the year, they had Assault, Silly, Alex, Asim, and Exceed, kind of a mouthful to say, a lot of A sounds. But if it is this roster, I think I've got to drop Exceed. Assault keeps the main AR, obviously, and I think Silly could play a decent flex. He's a little bit slower of a player. Then 2 faster subs, Alex and Asim, can be on there. And, I mean, if we are going to do a little more realistic, since GodRx was basically on the roster all year, we could just say Exceed doesn't count for this and throw GodRx back in there. And in that case, I think I'd do something weird again and say bye to Silly. And that seems really tough to do because he's kind of like the face of the team and the face of their franchise since they started. But I think Asim is too valuable to this team with the way he plays to drop. He's like the only entry type sub they have. And then Alex can play that slower, more methodical slaying sub. And then GodRx is a great flex, and Assault can take the main again. Silly's kind of the odd man out in the roles. It'd be basically him and Alex fighting for a spot. And Alex is a little younger and pretty talented, so I'd just go with him. I don't know. I think they might be a bit slow, so they could be a middle-of-the-pack team, but I think they'd be a middle-of-the-pack team with higher potential to rise with GodRx rather than Silly, even though GodRx and Assault together might be a little bit too slow. But like I said, if I'm betting on GodRx or Silly to have a random event to help carry me to top 4 instead of the constant top 8 finish, I'd choose GodRx over Silly to hard carry me to that. Then the next team is Toronto Ultra. Their roster finished up the year, even though they had like a billion different iterations of it. The roster to finish the year was Methods, Cammy, Classic, Kleenex, and Bance. To me, this might be probably the easiest decision of someone to drop. Some of the EU listeners might be a little upset, but it's very easily Bance. That's who you drop here. Methods is your clear main AR. He's like a top 6 to top 8 main AR in every game since World War II, since he really made his resurgence back into the scene. And then Cammy showed some insane potential as a flex. To me, Kleenex is your young, super aggressive star of the team as an SMG, and then Classic is kind of the same way as Kleenex with super aggressive play, but he's just a veteran, has a little bit more knowledge, and I actually think this team would be disgustingly nasty like they were at the end of this year. I think they'd be one of those top 6 consistent teams with like potential to randomly get top 4s, top 3s, and even win an event or two like they did this year. Because I think that Methods is one of the top 6 ARs. I think that Cammy is showing potential to be one of the top flexes there is, and then I think Kleenex is showing potential to be one of the top subs, and Classic is always a consistently good sub, maybe except for BO4. So in that case, you've got a veteran, pretty good sub, middle tier, then you've got maybe a rising sub, a rising flex, and a like middle to top tier AR. I think this team would be a consistent top team. Then next is London. You obviously know the roster here. Wuskin, Zero, Scraps, Shawnee, Dylan. This is another weird one. I think they might need 2 changes to be successful. Wuskin, Zero, Shawnee, and even Scraps pretty much all prefer an AR most of the time. Scraps sometimes likes the sub like the PPSH in World War II, but a lot of them prefer the AR, so they have a lot of role issues. And the rumor is that Wuskin and Scraps are both like kind of like able to shop around for spots. Which makes sense because you probably don't want to drop the twins together, but it is weird that they're being dropped because, I mean, you could argue Wuskin was the best player on their team this year. Historically, Scraps has even been better than Wuskin, and they're kind of like the 2 most marketable players in Europe. They're like the 2 most popular. They're so funny. They're just content machines, basically, for how funny they are. So it'd be weird to drop them, but if it was me making this decision, I had to drop one player. I'm going to drop Shawnee, even though he had that good champs performance. With Shawnee dropped, he's an AR. He's a guy who prefers an AR, and they have way too many of that in this team, and I'm taking Wuskin and Zero with an AR over Shawnee. They just historically have been better. So then I could say Wuskin could stay on the main. I'd have Zero at the flex, and then Scraps and Dylan at subs. I'd almost love to see them drop Shawnee and then choose between Wuskin and Zero for AR. If I wanted to go with a really ballsy move, I'd go with Zero on the main, Scraps on the flex, Dylan and Jerd on subs, bring Jerd back. I think that would be the team with the highest potential, but I don't think they'll ever break up the twins. I think if one of the twins is getting dropped, they're both getting dropped, or they're both staying, and I don't blame them. I mean, just like Arcitys and Prestinni, once they were apart, they kind of realized, hey, we want to play together, we just like playing together, and they're both good, and they could have success together. So yeah, if it was up to me completely, I think I'd go Zero, Scraps, Dylan, Jerd, but obviously that's not going to happen. I don't think they're going to split up the twins. And then the next team is New York. This is going to sound weird, but I actually think this one is decently easy. Their roster is Accuracy, Temp, Mac, Zuma, and Attach. And if you only watch MW, you're going to be like, what? But I think I'm going to drop Mac. And that's weird because he was insane this year. He was arguably their best player. Once he joined the team, they instantly turned around from a bottom 3 squad to maybe like a top 6 squad. And they even won an event with him. But this squad in 4v4 would be a problem. If they went with Accuracy on the main, Temp on the flex, and then Zuma and Attach, the duo on the subs. This team, 4v4 on LAN, has the potential to beat anyone. These are players that have, I guess Temp hasn't technically won an event, but Accuracy, Zoom, and Attach are multi-time champions. And if they catch Temp on a game like BO4, where he can be a top player, this team could be a consistent event winner. They're all extremely good players. Now, I've been hearing rumors that maybe Clay could be headed to New York, which would be interesting. If that was the case, I would assume that it means that Mac is being dropped, and then maybe Accuracy is being dropped because you're not going to have Accuracy and Clay on the same team. So that would also be weird though because Attach and Accuracy live together and they're like best friends. But apparently, if Clay is truly headed there, I would assume that the roster would be Clay, Temp, Zuma, and Attach then, because you're definitely not going to keep Accuracy. If Clay's going there, Accuracy's gone because you're not going to have those 2 main ARs in the same team. Clay's not going to give up the main anymore for anybody unless it's like Arcitys or Formal or Slasher or something. But if Clay goes there and they have Clay, Zuma, Attach, Temp, that team would also be nasty. I think it'd actually be better than having Accuracy. The next, most people's favorite team, also a decently easy one in my opinion, is Chicago. The roster, as you all know, is obviously Formal, Arcitys, Envoy, Scump, and Prestinni. And it's pretty simple here. It's going to be Prestinni. Formal and Scump are basically off limits because they're never going to be dropped unless Scump tells Hecz that he wants Formal gone again, or one of them decides to retire. They're never leaving the team. Hecz just won't drop them. They're the two biggest personalities in COD, and it's not like they're bad players either. They both probably deserve to stay on the team based on their play, but Scump, I mean, he played pretty good the whole year and then was obviously insane at Champs, their best player. Formal was pretty consistently good. He had a little bit of a lull towards like the beginning, middle of the year, but he was super good at Champs. So those two are definitely safe. And then it comes down, Envoy was an MVP candidate this year, sub duo with Scump. I don't think you drop him. And then Arcitys was super good all year. I don't think you drop him. Prestinni was a new man on the squad. They won one event, the first event there with him, and then they struggled. They were sometimes missing the semifinals, and sometimes they were finishing second to New York and stuff. So they were really inconsistent with Prestinni. That's kind of the name of Prestinni's game. He's a little bit inconsistent. He's so insanely good at times, and then sometimes he just seems like his head isn't in the game. So, I mean, you have to drop Prestinni here, but I think that if Prestinni gets dropped, Arcitys is probably going with him. So if the roster did stay and Arcitys stayed, though, you'd have Formal on the main, Arcitys on a flex, and then Scump and Envoy on subs, which would be an absolutely disgusting roster. But Arcitys stated again that he doesn't want to be a flex anymore. He wants the main AR back again. So I think if they do decide to cut Prestinni, then Arcitys will also want out. And I think, honestly, the perfect solution for this team is sitting on their bench. It'd be Gunless. Formal on a main, Gunless on the flex, then Scump and Envoy on subs would probably have dynasty potential. But obviously that won't happen because, I mean, two teams with Gunless and Formal have blown up now. They just don't get along anymore. So Gunless definitely will not hit this roster. But on paper, that would be like the most disgusting roster ever. That'd be like dynasty potential. But I don't think they're going to get along at all, so that won't work. So my bold prediction is that, I mean, I think they're going to get Dashy. I think Dashy will suffer through a flex role that he doesn't really want to be in, just to be reunited with Hecz and Scump and those guys. And even if he is willing to take on that flex, there's a decent chance that in the next game the flex could be on an AR role a lot. And to me, it seems like Dashy plays a little faster anyways. He seems like a natural flex to me. He keeps wanting to have the main AR, but with the speed he plays at, and he loved the Maddox, that was his best, was when he was with the Maddox. Seems like Dashy should be like a flex role like that, where he can ramp it up a little faster, because he doesn't really play slow enough to be an AR, it seems like, at most times. So they'd have Formal on the main, Dashy on the flex, then Scump and Envoy, another team with dynasty potential. I mean, that team would be insane. I think Dashy will take on flex role to be reunited with Hecz and Scump. And then Florida, Sky's Awakening, Fero, Havoc, Frosty. So not looking at roles that they play, the obvious answer seems to be Havoc. However, he is truly the only natural sub on this team, I think. I think Awakening does prefer an AR. I know Fero likes the AR. And I think Frosty might even like an AR too. We've seen Frosty run a Maddox and now a sub, so maybe he likes the sub. And then obviously Skies prefers the main AR. But on the other hand, I think Frosty is so versatile, he would continue to run a sub if you have to. And I think that Awakening could also run a sub, and even Fero could. But I do think Fero is like a top level flex, like top 3, along with like Gunless and maybe Priesta. So I kind of want him there, and as weird as it is, if I could say it, I think I'm going to drop Havoc pretty easily here. I think there's something about this team folding at Champs, like 4 straight years. Teams with Havoc have folded like 4 straight years and haven't been able to win a series. And I think he's the common denominator in that situation. So if you had Skies on the main, Fero on a flex, Awakening, and Frosty on subs, they would have insane potential if the subs work out. I mean, I could honestly see the roles not working, because they don't really have like an entry sub or like really, really fast subs. But talent-wise, this team could be absolutely insane. To me, if you maybe end up dropping Awakening if it hits land, for like, if you can find an entry sub out there, since there's going to be so many players that are usually in the league that are available because there's so little spots. If you could find somebody that could be an entry sub for you that could slide in, Frosty could be your more methodical slaying sub, Fero on a flex, and Skies on a main. If this team gets an entry sub for Awakening, they would be insane. They could be a top team. The next, probably the hardest team. There's really nobody that deserves to be dropped. It's Dallas Empire. I mean, like I said, this is easily the hardest one to decide, and it isn't even close. Obviously, they've made the decision already. It was Clay. When I was writing my notes for this, I did decide that it probably should be Clay. I think the FaZe roster decision coming up is pretty easy. And on Dallas, you're not dropping shottzyy. He's super young, just won MVP as a rookie. You're not dropping him. I don't think you're dropping Huke or Illey because they're all so like super young and they're franchise type talent. And then I sure as hell don't want to drop Clay or Crim, because Clay just went back to back and Crim is the GOAT. Both of them have 3 rings and are 2 of the all-time greats. They're probably both top 4, top 5, and they can still play. And they're both super good leaders. I mean, I think they balance each other out well because Clay's a little more calm and Crim's a little bit more of a rager, but I think they balance each other out really well, which is why they're so good together on the team. But I do think that Clay should be the one to go, although I do think Clay is almost a better leader and better main AR. I just don't think that anybody will ever drop Crim, really, since he's the winningest player ever, now with tied for the most rings. So if I would keep Clay because I say he's a better main AR, that means I'm literally dropping the winningest player of all time, who is almost unanimously considered the GOAT, so that doesn't really make sense. And I also do think that Crim maybe has a few more years left in the tank than Clay. Clay's a little bit older, so I think you would have to go with dropping Clay like they did, because I just don't think anybody would ever drop Crim being the winningest player. Unfortunately for Clay, I think he was better at this game. He's a better main AR, even a better leader, but people just aren't going to drop Crim being the winningest player, which sucks for Clay, but it seemed like he understands. Honestly, you could have just flipped a coin on this one. It said heads, Clay's drop, tails, Crim's drop. Whatever it landed on, they'd have been fine because both players deserve to have a roster spot, but one of them has to be dropped. Like I said, nobody deserves to be dropped here. This one feels dumb to even do because I don't have a legit answer that's like, yeah, Clay should definitely be dropped. I mean, all the other ones I can make a legit argument for why the person I said should be dropped, but this one is just like, I mean, none of them deserve to be dropped at all. I mean, some people would say maybe Illey, but Illey's a super young, up-and-coming talent. He does the dirty work already. I mean, the dude's 18 and he's already willing to do all the dirty work. That's going to be an all-time great player, I think. And Crim just won Champs MVP, so you can't really drop a guy after he wins Champs MVP. So the new roles on their team, Crim becomes the new main. I would say Illey becomes the flex, and then Huke and shottzyy are the subs. Might be the best sub duo in the league. That's a nasty team. And then finally, the Atlanta FaZe. To me, this one actually isn't too difficult as you might think it is. I'm dropping Major Maniac. He's absolutely disgusting, but if you drop him, you get Cellium moved to the main, and then Priesta can stay on the flex where he's best at, and then Simp and Abezy can go on the subs. And the reason this helps so much is because you've got, I mean, Priesta can move to the flex where he wasn't really able to play too much this year, and that's where he's best at. And then Simp and Abezy are on the subs, which is probably the best sub duo in the world, and I think Cellium would be a disgusting main AR. And this team is probably the instant favorite to be the best team in Cold War, and I honestly think this is probably what they do. If they're going to keep 4 on the roster, this is probably the route they go. Although I do have another prediction with Clay. I could see them dropping both Major Maniac and Priesta. I could see Priesta taking that flex spot on Chicago and making their roster formal Priesta, Scump, and Envoy. Then I could see Clay taking this team because they are in need of leadership, and then Clay could be the main AR, Cellium could be the flex, and then Simp and Abezy with the subs, and that team would be absolutely disgusting again. But Priesta is tough to drop because he's like probably the most versatile player in the league. He could play a main AR if he had to. He's super good on the flex, and then he could also be a pure sub. And then I think Simp, Abezy, and Cellium are pretty much undroppable players right now. So Major Maniac's kind of the odd man out, even though he seems to be a top player. So super unfortunate for him. He's just on a team with insane talent. So obviously, like I said, kind of wrapping up the video here. Obviously, looking at the players I just said I drop, it shows that probably none of these rosters, besides maybe like Chicago, Dallas, and Atlanta, will actually happen. Like Dallas is going to keep their 4, Atlanta might just keep 4 of their players, and if Arcitys is willing to split up with Prestinni, Chicago might just keep 4 of their players. But other than that, probably none of these rosters are going to happen. They're probably going to drop more than one player and pick up a couple new players, especially with the talent pool being so small. A lot of these fringe players are going to leave. I mean, think about it. If players like Major Maniac, Clay, Prestinni, maybe even Arcitys, Silly, Havoc, and then guys on the bench like Dashy, Enable, Looney, Gunless, Brack, and so many more, Jerd, they're all available, Rated. All these guys are available. There's going to be more than just one player dropped on each team with nobody new coming in. There's going to be a lot of these new bench players and players that get dropped from teams that are going to swap teams. There's just going to be more than one player going on each roster, let's be honest. But yeah, like I said, if it's going to be 4 players that stay from each team, this is what I would go with. But this is not going to happen. There's going to be a lot more changes. And then also the league is apparently not expanding, which is probably the biggest short-term risk they could take with possibly a long-term payout. They said that they would want to wait until 2022 so they can showcase how valuable the league would be if it's on land for a year. And this is solely because they want teams to pay more to buy in my opinion. 4v4 is better for the future of the league, but I personally think it was a huge mistake not to expand with it because now 12 spots are cut from the league and only 48 players make it to the league. So you're just cutting 12 people out of a job, and not only that, you're cutting more than 12 people because you're cutting sub spots. There's probably only 1 sub spot per team when there was a lot more before. So So that's a lot of people losing out on jobs, which in a time like this, you don't really want that. And then it could lead to legends retiring and us losing popular players, which could severely hurt the league. I mean, just recently now JCap retired yesterday. Now we lost Karma and JCap, two absolute legends, two multi-time world champions. So cutting all these spots, I'm worried guys like Hecz and even like Clay and people could go, and that's not good for the scene at all when you're starting a league and all your like OG stars are kind of leaving. So I'm just really upset with the decision not to expand with the amount of interest. It seems like they reported that they had so much interest to expand, but they just didn't do it. I think expanding to like 16 or more teams would also make the tournaments more interesting and the viewing experience better. So I'm just sad that they're not expanding at all, because I want to see a new format for the league. I didn't really like the format that much this year. But that's going to do it for this little bit of a longer video that wasn't technically a podcast. It was a pretty highly requested video though, so I hope you guys did enjoy it with the official announcement of 4v4. I am excited for that. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. I enjoyed making this video a lot. It was something I look forward to. If you guys didn't know, besides watching the games and analyzing, Roster Mania is kind of like my favorite point of the year always. I love to see the rumors of where people are going to go and see what rumors kind of come up and then don't come to fruition, to kind of imagine what those teams could have been like. And as always, be sure to leave a like, comment, and sub for more content on the CDL if you enjoyed, and especially comment who you drop off of each team and each roster, and any bold roster moves you are predicted to happen this season. If you think somehow Paris is going to pick up a super team or something, comment that. Or if you think London's going to make a crazy move or whatever, comment your roster, bold predictions that you're predicting to happen. And like I said, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for the recent support, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Hope you enjoyed watching.